Stella Tennant, the aristocrat who was never a supermodel, and I'm your host. Welcome to my channel, where we take an in-depth look at the people who make fashion. Today we are looking at Stella Tennant, a model who walked so that Bella Hadid could run. This is the story of Stella Tennant. Our story begins in 1969, but first, let's get familiar with our subject. Let's set the tone with an opening montage. We have archival runway clips of Stella, someone who looked beautiful, butch, and androgynous. She looked aristocratic, yet she had this rebellious aura to her. The narrator can frame her as a paradox, someone who had every advantage in the world, someone with great privilege, yet she did things her own way, which sometimes put her at odds with the establishment. And she always remained true to herself, which sometimes meant making bold moves that no one saw coming. The Tennant family name is synonymous with British aristocracy. Her grandmother, Deborah Mitford, was a member of the infamous Mitford sisters, a group of 6 eccentric English sisters who made headlines during the first half of the 20th century for their scandalous behavior and political affiliations. 3 of the sisters, Unity, Diana, and Bibi, were staunch supporters of Hitler and Mussolini. And it was said that her family were ashamed of them. In fact, it was said that her mother even tried to erase any mention of them. So they weren't really sure how much of a role these political affiliations played in shaping the early years of Stella. But what we do know is that growing up, she had every advantage. She went to some of the best schools in Britain, including Heathfield St. Mary's in Kent, and then the University of Oxford, where she studied fine art sculpture. It wasn't all plain sailing, though. Stella grew up with dyslexia, and her teachers didn't really understand this. They just thought she was lazy and unmotivated, so she struggled a lot. It's not surprising, then, that when she graduated from university, she didn't go into the family business of modeling. In fact, she tried her best to stay away from the fashion world. She got a job working as a waitress and then as a nanny. But by 1993, she was working as a part-time model. Not because she wanted to, but because her friends talked her into it. And that's when everything changed. At the time, Stella was living in Edinburgh, Scotland, and she had a septum piercing. This alone would make her stand out in the fashion industry, which was still very much dominated by supermodels like Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, and Linda Evangelista. The thing is, at the time, the industry didn't want models who looked like them. It was an era where waif looks were becoming more popular. Think Kate Moss or Nadja Auermann. But despite the fact that she had this look, she still stood out because of her septum piercing. That caught the eyes of photographers like J.R. Garcia, who cast her in an editorial for Arena, and soon after she caught the eye of designer Vivienne Westwood, who put her in one of her shows. And then everything started to happen quickly. Designers started calling her. Magazines wanted her in editorials. And she even got calls from American Vogue, which at the time was the most prestigious magazine in the world. And her rise to prominence happened so fast that no one was quite sure how to categorize her. She didn't fit the mold of the supermodels, but she also didn't fit the mold of the new breed of waifs. Who was she? To many people, she was a supermodel, but she didn't consider herself as such. She told The Guardian, "I'm not a supermodel. I don't fit into that category. I never did. I think they're fantastic. They're wonderful celebrities, but I'm not one of them." In 1994, she appeared in a Versace campaign, but her breakthrough moment came when she landed a cover of British Vogue in October of that year. At the time, American Vogue was undergoing a change of guard. Anna Wintour, who had been at the helm since 1988, was starting to feel the pressure of competition. Suddenly, other magazines like Harper's Bazaar and Allure were offering bigger advances to designers and models than Vogue was. And this was a threat to Wintour. She had helped bring fashion to the mainstream, and she wasn't going to watch it slip through her fingers. So in September 1994, she called on photographer Steven Meisel to shoot Madonna for the October issue. And that cover became the highest-selling fashion cover of the year. Encouraged by the success of the Madonna cover, Wintour decided to shake things up and put someone new on the cover of the following month. That someone was Stella Tennant. The shoot was unlike anything Vogue had ever seen before. It was shot in black and white and featured Stella wearing masculine clothes, complete with a newsboy cap and a cigarette dangling from her lips. The cover was a critical and commercial success. And with that, Stella's career took off. Versace was one of the first to recognize her star power and tapped her to be the face of one of their campaigns. Shortly after, she became a favorite of Chanel and was featured in multiple campaigns. And she was also a favorite of Karl Lagerfeld, who described her as intelligent, cool, and a little bit dangerous. Lagerfeld was known for his provocative and sometimes offensive statements, so to be on his good side was quite the achievement. And what's interesting is that although she was becoming famous, it was done in a way that seemed almost alien to her. She hated being photographed by the paparazzi and hated the idea of being famous. In a rare interview with the New York Times, she said, "I'm not interested in being famous. I'm not interested in that sort of celebrity culture." By the late 90s, Stella was everywhere. She was the face of Burberry. She had multiple covers of Vogue under her belt, and she had closed shows for Alexander McQueen. And then came the spring-summer 1996 ready-to-wear show. This was a pivotal moment for Stella because it was here that she really established herself as a major player in fashion. She opened the show in a black leather jacket and matching trousers, and closed it in a white shirt and black tie. This was a clear sign of her influence. Designers were taking risks with casting her in their shows, something that hadn't been done before. They were putting her in traditionally masculine clothes and letting her own unique androgynous style shine through. At the time, the fashion industry was going through a major shift. The supermodels were getting older, and designers were looking for fresh faces to fill their runways. Enter Stella Tennant. She became one of the most important models of the decade, but not because she conformed to any beauty standards. In fact, she did the opposite. She broke away from the supermodel mold and paved the way for a new kind of beauty standard, one that was more inclusive and celebrated diversity. What's interesting is that Stella became famous at a time where grunge was blowing up. And although she looked like she could have been a grunge girl, she didn't really fit into that category either. She was too polished, too refined. She was an aristocrat after all. But that's what made her so appealing. She was the perfect blend of high and low culture. She was the cool rebel who could pull off both a Chanel suit and a ripped pair of jeans. And that's why she became the face of Alexander McQueen's Highland Rape collection, a collection that was inspired by the rape of women in the Scottish Highlands. McQueen chose Stella for the job because he knew that she could pull off the look. She was the perfect mix of aristocratic elegance and raw rebellion. She was the face of Prada during the minimalism trend of the late 90s, a trend that celebrated simplicity and clean lines. And Stella was the perfect embodiment of that aesthetic. She was intelligent, she was witty, and she was never afraid to speak her mind. She was the antithesis of the ditzy blonde bombshell, and that's what made her so appealing. She was different, and she knew it. And although she was uncomfortable with fame, she knew that she was talented, and she knew that she was good at what she did. And she used that to her advantage. She used her platform to speak out against the superficiality of the fashion industry. She once said, "Fashion can be so cruel and superficial, but it's also full of interesting, intelligent people who just want to express themselves creatively." But despite her success, Stella was never one for the limelight. She was always uncomfortable with the attention, and she always felt like an outsider. She was an aristocrat who hung out with punks. She was a model who hated being photographed by the paparazzi. She was a high-fashion icon who preferred jeans and a t-shirt. And that's what made her so fascinating. She was a puzzle that everyone wanted to solve, but no one ever did. She was Stella Tennant, and she was like no one else. Now let's talk about some unknown facts and controversies. Although she was reluctant to be photographed, Stella understood the importance of the image and she used it to her advantage. Many people believe that Stella was uncomfortable with her septum piercing and that she only wore it to make a statement. However, there is no evidence to support this claim. In fact, Stella once said, "I never want to take it out, it's a part of me now." There's this myth that Stella was always uncomfortable with fame and the fashion industry, but the truth is she was just misunderstood. She wasn't opposed to fashion. In fact, she loved it. She just didn't like the superficiality of it all. She once said, "Fashion can be cruel and superficial, but it's also full of interesting, intelligent people who just want to express themselves creatively." So what do you think? Did we miss anything? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'm your host. Until next time, stay tuned. Day.